Welcome to Beyond the Wheeze, the podcast where perseverance meets potential. I'm Josh Realm, public speaker, marathon runner, asthma advocate, and your host as we explore the intersection of health, fitness, and resilience. Whether you're managing asthma, chasing a new personal best, or simply looking for inspiration, Beyond the Wheeze is here to show you that no challenge is too great to overcome. Together, we'll uncover stories, insights, and strategies to help you push beyond your limits. It's time to breathe deeply, move forward, and unlock your true potential, one step at a time. Welcome to Beyond the Wheeze. Today we have two special guests joining us. Sahil Manjania, Director of DIA Labs Canada, and Pavan Yecham, Chief Scientific Officer at DIA Labs Canada. Sahil and his team are at the forefront of medical innovation, working on groundbreaking solutions to improve asthma care and lung health. One of their most exciting developments is AirSense, a wearable technology designed to provide real-time lung function monitoring. This technology has the potential to revolutionize how individuals manage asthma and other respiratory conditions, offering a new level of data-driven insights and proactive care. Pavan brings extensive expertise in neuroscience and biomedical innovation, overseeing scientific research development at DIA Labs. His background in neuroactivity, optogenetics, and advanced imaging techniques provide a unique perspective on bridging scientific discovery with real-world healthcare applications. In this episode, we'll discuss the impact of technology on asthma management, the challenge of developing medical devices, and the future of respiratory health innovation. We'll also explore the highly individualized nature of asthma, how our current view of asthma as a single condition may overlook the diverse ways that it manifests in different individuals. So with that being said, let's dive right into it. Gentlemen, welcome to Beyond the Wheeze podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Really appreciate you being here. And on short notice, as we discussed before hitting the record button, I was in with you guys, I guess now about 2 months ago, a month and a half ago in Mississauga, where you had a panel discussion. And I was fortunate to be part of that. And that is how we got connected. And that is why we're all here speaking today. But I did recently have a listener reach out to me and ask for somebody that might be able to come on the show and say what might be coming down the pipeline in regards to asthma care innovation or instrumentation, really anything like that. So any insights you guys might have would be absolutely terrific.
Yeah, absolutely. For respiratory care, especially asthma and COPD, clinically, it's a very complicated picture. And at DIA Labs, we are developing a medical device. It's a wearable technology that can continuously monitor asthma symptoms for up to 14 days. We are a really kind of a big fan of the repeated kind of continuous monitoring space, so we can track asthma symptoms and allow for patients to have a management approach that is in real time. And Pavan, as a chief scientific officer, has done a phenomenal job over the past year working with our company to develop this device. And Pavan, if you want to share a little more about that as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Sahil. And really, one of the main goals for asthma, and one of the main goals for the development of this device has been to bridge this gap that we've really identified in healthcare. Asthma, and we'll get into this, but asthma is really different, from person to person, patient to patient. And from a clinician standpoint, this is really hard to treat. This is really hard to treat without really understanding how is a patient responding to the treatments that I'm giving them. Are their symptoms getting worse? Are they getting better over time? How does it look like? And a snapshot in time is very valuable when a patient comes in and visits. However, really understanding the picture over an extended period of time, that's very valuable. And that's a significant gap in healthcare right now.
I feel like with AI, it'll probably help bridge a lot of those gaps. And I guess time will tell.
Absolutely. We live in a time where AI is a big trend, especially it's attracting a lot of investors in the medical device space, fintech, and all the other technology spaces. AI is a great tool. It's been around actually for many years now, or older. And I feel like now we're really starting to understand the power of AI. Of course, there are many challenges tied to artificial intelligence, machine learning from a regulatory standpoint. But as time is progressing, even we are part of this story where our medical device AirSense also uses AI to train our software system. And again, it's a challenging process because all of this is really new to Health Canada, to FDA. But again, we're
So, Sahil, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to work in this field of respiratory health innovation?
yeah, great question. So I started off at Western University doing a major in health sciences and a minor in biology. For those of you who know, Western University is a leader in innovation and as well as the clinical trials. So for anybody looking to, at the university, that's a great opportunity. Uh, and for me, I pretty much began to fall in love with advanced cell biology, advanced genetics, and like a lot of the kind of advanced, organic chemistry courses that are offered at Western University. And it was a third-year course called Global Health and Innovation, led by Dr. Abhidhamma Adhika, who has done great work in the past with the World Health Organization and even leading his own ventures as well. I see Dr. Adhika as a mentor of mine still up until this day, because he teaches this course about translational science and something that he calls the no-do gap, which is the gap between what the research evidence says works best versus what we actually implement into practice. And so, up until my third year, I was really involved with these advanced kind of courses and stuff. And I figured that, there's so much great research because in my kind of like my free time, I used to speak with the professors, go to the office hours, kind of learn about, hey, what type of research do you have going on currently? And that was a common trend that I found, that there's a lot of great research, but it just doesn't make it to the bedside. And so I discovered that there's a whole new thing called translational science. And then from there, we actually got to develop a solution to a global health problem in that third year class that I mentioned that was led by Dr. Adhika. And that was a really good starting point for me to learn how to solve these challenges. And then I took the same course led by the same professor in the fourth year. And so it was the fourth year project that I got to take on to solve the prescription opioid overdose crisis in London, Ontario. And we developed a software called SafeRx with my team. And that was a great experience to, work with collaborative minds to come up with an innovative solution. And then also to understand, will clinicians or patients actually enjoy and use this innovative solution? And so from that point on, I began to explore more research within asthma. It's always kind of been a passion of mine from those advanced cell biology courses that I took earlier on. And so we began to look at a couple of devices that can potentially, work to offer continuous asthma monitoring. And then we put together a great team. That's where Pavan and I met about a year and a half ago. And then from there, this is where we're at. We expanded our team. We raised a lot of funding, and we worked on the prototype of the device. And now we are planning our clinical testing. And one book that I actually wanted to show to the viewers, anybody that is interested in getting into this, innovation and medical device space, is a book called The Brilliant Business Models in Healthcare. So this is a book that I was recommended by one of my professors in fourth year. I picked up on him. And it's a very good starting point to learn how global health challenges have been solved over the years through, anything which is known as technology is not just as a medical device, right? There's so many innovative policies. There's so many innovative treatment approaches, drugs, and technology, again, is not more, technology is more than just a device.
Pavan, your expertise lies in neuroscience and biomedical research. How did you transition in respiratory health and medical technology?
Well, it's a good question, Josh. I actually get asked that quite a bit these days. So to answer that, I think I'll also give a bit about my history and kind of how I got into science a little bit. So, the lab has been a very familiar place for me. I was able to get some early opportunities to volunteer back in high school. And throughout college, there have been quite a few labs that I've, gotten my feet in, and really sunk my teeth into. So these experiences have definitely culminated and given me an idea of what is possible, really, inside the lab. And after, taking some time out and after school, understanding the industry and the translational value of this research, that was really what I was able to gain this last year. And that was definitely through my experience with the company. Back in undergrad, I majored in cell biology and neuroscience. I minored in psychology and nutrition. And after that, I also, went back and did my master's for a few years. And I did a master's in science and biomedical science. So you kind of get the theme that I was probably in a lab for some time. And really, this is the advice I kind of give to a lot of students who, find themselves, trying to take this experience and do something with it in industry. And especially in a field like neuroscience, it's really easy to get caught up in the specifics, getting lost in the weeds that, okay, I spent so many years studying the brain, studying optogenetics, fiber photometry, calcium imaging. Okay, very specialized things. But what do I do with them? Right? What do I do with them? I can't just find exactly what I was doing and pick that up where I left off, right? You have to take a step back and you have to say, okay, I gained some very, very valuable skills, some very translational skills that can help me build something. So at the end of the day, the brain is a circuit, okay? So to study this circuit, this highly engineered, overcomplicated circuit, we need to simplify it. Okay, so in that, I was able to really understand circuitry. I had to develop my computer science skills. I had to develop data aggregation, statistics. There are quite a few different skills that I was walking away with. And some of my specific projects really helped me get comfortable with circuitry, with wiring, with soldering, with very, medical device friendly skills, right? So you really have to take a step back and from the specifics and look at what skills did you walk away with. And even right now, you're starting to see quite a few. There's, I would call it an exodus of PhDs walking away from academia into industry. And there's quite a bit of that. And what a PhD student or even an undergraduate student, someone who spends time in science, what they walk away with at the end of the day is a highly specialized skill set. How do you navigate the unknown? How do you dive into literature review? How do you understand what other people are researching, really at the forefront of our own understanding of a particular issue? In this case, it may be asthma, respiratory illnesses. But at the end of the day, you are looking at systems physiology, and you walk it back further. And I spent quite some time in cell biology. And that's also, we can touch a bit about our design of our device later, but really understanding what is happening in asthma and respiratory care at the cellular level. What is happening? Why are these airways being remodeled? What is causing this? How is it that we can identify it? Okay, fine. This is happening at a cellular level. Now, at a systems level, how does this present physiologically? What are the symptoms that asthma patients present with in not severe asthma and severe asthma attacks, and allergic asthma, non-allergic asthma? So there's quite a few different ways this can go. And now even another step broader, and this is where the translational sciences for healthcare overall comes in. It's, well, what are the gaps here? What is it that the physician has to keep in mind? All these different ways asthma can go and present. How can we help that? Right? So taking steps back and then coming back to the issue.
You really do look at it from all angles.
Absolutely. And there's no way to avoid that. And that's what science teaches you. You know, it's really easy to get tunneled. And the deeper you get tunneled, great, but you have to take a step back and go, okay, where am I going? What direction am I going? Let me readjust. Let me come back. Okay. And in designing a device, you really have to take a step back, 2 step backs, 3 steps back and realize, wait, there is a person who's going to wear this. Is this comfortable? Does this
look good?
Consistent? Does it look good? Is this consistent with life? Right? At the end of the day, I mean, yeah, I could really do some invasive things and really uncomfortable things to understand, but is anyone going to wear this? Right?
That's right. And you need to consider all age groups as well.
100%.
So what is something that they're going to want to use and ensuring it works? How are you going to make them carry it?
I was just going to say, building off what Josh said, the social aspect for medical devices is a whole kind of different field on its own, right? So you kind of have many different aspects. You have obviously the science aspect of it, which is kind of the core aspect. And then you have, the social aspect of it. You have the reimbursement, the funding aspect. Why will patients use this? How long will they use it for? What are we trying to really measure here? And do we even have a way to measure, right? And then, as Jonathan said, okay, well, what about targeting all age groups, right? What about targeting all the different demographics, religion playing a role, and all that stuff?
So what was the inspiration behind DIA Labs and the development of AirSense?
Yeah, that's a great question. And same. So we've got asked this question a couple of times, and building off of, where I left off. So I kind of fell in love with the business aspect of this industry. So there's so many different pathways you can go, just being a regular, pre-med undergrad student, which I was as well. And so I began to explore the research for asthma. And then from there, we looked at a couple of research papers ourselves. And one thing that we found that really stood out to us was that historically, Black, Indigenous, and people of color have been excluded from asthma clinical research because that bulky old Spronger device isn't actually made to, account for their kind of individual asthma characteristics. And so that was a huge turning point for us, where we started to do a lot of extensive market research. We started to look at a lot of the literature. We're currently working on another research paper right now. And yeah, so from there, we started to reach out to a lot of principal investigators that are working in asthma clinical trials. And I myself also work as a clinical researcher. I've done a couple of asthma studies led by drug sponsor companies in the past. So that was one of the points where I actually got to use a Spronger device myself and realized how challenging it actually is to use, not only for the patients, but even for, the study coordinators or even the PI who was the medical doctor on site.
And to add just a little bit to that, again, in this literature review where we were reading through quite a bit of studies about asthma, we really understood, well, it is a highly treatable disease. It is highly treatable. And at the same time, it is one of the leading causes of a preventable death. A preventable death in North America. Now, where is this disconnect and why is it happening? And it really comes down to the patient being able to identify this is an asthma attack. What I had this morning was an asthma attack. It wasn't just a coughing fit. It wasn't just, some pollen allergies. I had a severe asthma attack and I didn't do anything about it. Now, patients aren't always so lucky, right? So when it comes down to that, being able to identify, it's really a feedback, that positive feedback of being able to say, hey, I know what it feels like right now. And I was taught and alerted that this was an asthma attack the last time it happened. This time I'm going to use my inhaler. There's a reason you carry the inhaler around, because it works. It works well. Yet there is a disconnect. And I think that has been really that stark contrast was a very, very clear motivation for us to develop in this space.
Yeah, and some of the numbers when we spoke to some of the professionals in the space, we figured that, well, okay, it's a treatable condition. It's significantly leading to a lot of delays in our emergency rooms, especially here in Ontario, where the healthcare system since the past couple of years has been suffering due to the lack of physicians. And so annually, you have about 80,000 emergency room visits due to asthma, as Pavan said, many of which are preventable. And that's really what we're aiming to do with our device. And as you know, 5 million Canadians are currently living with asthma in Canada. That's a pretty big number right now. And we have the ability to get that under.
I can speak about that from personal experience. The hospital really was a revolving door for myself and my family because of my lungs. Now, education is huge as well, and I strive to really advocate for more CREs in every single hospital out there. I think it's really important. And I've mentioned some examples before in the past, but typically what happens for me is when I go in the hospital, well, my little oxygen thing on my finger might say that I'm 96%, 95%. I don't feel that way. This happened a few weeks ago when I talked about it on the last podcast. I went in after 3-4 days of struggling to breathe, going through an inhaler a day, taking nebulizers left, right, and center back to back. And then, 34 years of severe asthma, I know what's going on. I should probably go to the hospital. And what did the hospital do? Well, they said, you're at 95%. Expect about an 8-hour wait. I haven't had my mask in like an hour. I need one right now. She told me it was a lot quicker for me to go to the health clinic. Unfortunately, that's not where I needed to be. So that's an issue. And back to what Pavan said as well earlier, was that, well, is it just an asthma attack or is it something else? It might be too late unless you can be alerted as it progresses. And like you said, maybe now's a good time to take your puffer before it gets bad, because it can get bad fast. So I think developing a technology that helps with that is absolutely huge. I think it's extremely important what you guys are doing.
Yeah. No, Josh,
thank you. And to
for certified respiratory educators, or which we call them CREs. And I want to acknowledge some of the great work that Asthma Canada, as well as the Lung Health Foundation, is trying to do to implement more CRE across the province. Now, I want to kind of use an example from certified diabetes educators. Now, basically, in Orangeville, I had quite a bit of experience with that town because I got the opportunity to work with a few folks to run a medical center up in Orangeville. And it was a population that suffers from type 2 diabetes, as well as asthma. But for type 2 diabetes, we did a workshop with Headwaters Hospital, where a few of the certified diabetes educators came in and they just spoke to the patients, many of which were immigrants. And so that was the first time the patients fully got to, learn about these type of diagnostic devices and understand how their kind of insulin pattern can change and why. And I think that was a huge shift for them, and a moment of realization that, hey, you know what? Actually, I think there is some light down the tunnel, and I can control my diabetes by speaking to these individuals that have experience with this. So the conversation is very different. And I feel like a lot of pharmacists who are also certified respiratory educators play a major role in improving, the prevalence of asthma as a whole in Ontario. And so we are planning to also do more of those type of workshops, especially for asthma in local clinics, to educate, the patients on how this condition occurs, how it can be controlled, and really provide them with hope that there is support available for you. So that's one thing that we are trying to constantly work on as well.
Josh, to speak to one thing that you had mentioned. You ending up in the ER and your pulse oxygen saturation saying, "Hey, it's 95, 96." I remember as an asthma patient myself when that happened to me as a kid, and the doctor told me it was 98, 99, and I couldn't breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that really highlights the value of, if a device was in the situation, the multivariable approach. You really cannot just look at oxygen saturation, because until a very severe incident occurs, that's not going to dip more than 2 or 3%. So it's really important to have a snapshot of what everything is. How's your heart behaving? What's your ECG like? What's happening at a cellular level that's causing this? So I just wanted to talk about that. That's very important as well.
So this time around, presenting myself to the hospital, I'm 34 years old. Something similar happened to me when I was about 12 years old. I showed up at the hospital, needed to be there. Oxygen, 98, 97%. The doctor lectured my mom about wasting healthcare dollars and valuable resources. And my mom said, "I know my son, he needs to be here. His asthma is bad, he needs to be here. He can't breathe, look at him, he's blue. Well,
Wow.
his stats are fine. It's a waste of money." Blah, 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 the whole spiel. Anyways, my mom went on full mom mode. She won that battle. And that evening, I was admitted to the hospital. Now, the last thing I remember is passing out. I had a bunch of doctors around me. I passed out. I fainted. And I woke up on a helicopter. So at this hospital, that's supposed to be the best hospital that we have locally, I was being airlifted out of there to go to sick kids in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I spent between 1 to 2 weeks in ICU. I spent a week in ACU, and I spent another week in general admissions.
Oh, wow.
And that is scary, because what if my mom wasn't there to advocate for me? That's huge. It would have been absolutely disastrous. Nothing good would have came out of that. Now, my mom is asthmatic herself, so she knows the signs. So she was that learning piece. She bridged that gap between the patient and the healthcare system. And that's why I'm here as an advocate, so I could bridge that gap, and why I'm extremely grateful to have people like you come in, because you really are the future of asthma care and technology, because we can only really progress. We can't digress. We have to go forward, and you're here to do that. And that's terrific.
So it's a two-way story, without having the voice in the community, we're really not able to do what we do, right? And so, glad that you are, on this platform, and the Beyond the Wheeze podcast has really been something that has also significantly helped us as innovators as well. So yes, you're helping other patients, but you're also helping innovators like ours.
Absolutely. That's well said, Sahil. Yeah, we listen to your podcast all the time.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Can you walk us through the journey of bringing a medical device from concept to reality? Surely it can't be easy. I'm sure there are a trove of steps involved in that.
Yeah. I say this all the time, that, running a startup company is like waking up and just giving a CPR. The hardest thing is to obviously keep it alive. And in the medical device space, it's especially challenging because of the regulatory requirements. And oftentimes, innovators kind of see the regulatory body as in, the devil or the bad guys, but that's really not the situation. The regulatory bodies are there to make sure that the patients, are safe, and you as an innovator is also protected in the long term from any sort of recalls and stuff like that. So I think those two things are really important to acknowledge. But to answer your question, so, it all starts off with some great research. And there's many people that are involved with this great research. And oftentimes, if the research is kind of led by, let's just say, a few scientists, that medical device is a little difficult to bring forward, because it takes a lot of stakeholders to express what they really feel is valuable for that medical device. So there's really 5 key roles for a medical device company to start. You need great research, and so you need some sort of chief scientific officer that can handle the hardware and software component. For that, we have Pavan, who's done a phenomenal job. You need quality management system and regulatory affairs to make sure that you're following the correct, guidance documents and stuff like that are put forward by Health Canada, FDA, and some of the other regulatory bodies. And then a key component is business development and strategic partnerships. At the end of the day, you are running a business. So yes, you may have great science, but if you can't run the business, it's going to be very difficult to bring this medical device forward. And then obviously, managing the intellectual property and then coming up with how you can navigate public relations. Understanding who's going to want your device is a key thing early on. And, just speaking to them. Hey, what do you think? Is this going to work? Is this something that you would use? No matter who your end user is. If it's physicians, it's a great conversation to have, right? Because you can save a lot of time and money while developing a device. If it's patients, it's the same thing, right? Those end users are really the kind of make it or break it, points for your medical device.
AirSense is designed to provide real-time lung function monitoring. How does it work, and what makes it different from traditional peak flow meters and spirometers?
So going back to a little bit of what we said when we talked about designing or really understanding a disease at various levels to design a device, right? So understanding what is it at a cellular level, how is it presenting at a physiological level, and what symptoms can we see? So we kind of work backwards with this. So we said, what are the symptoms that present in an asthma attack? And we said, how can we capture these? What are the various biometrics? Like you said, pulse ox would be really important, heart rate, respiration. So what are these things and how do they change? So that's kind of the starting point. This device works by taking in these various biometrics and with the help of AI, tailoring an approach over time. How is it that your trends are changing over time? How is it that your condition is changing over time? Is it in response to a treatment? Is it in response to an exacerbation? So a device like this is taking in various sets of data and it's learning over time as well. It's learning with your environment, with how you are responding to your treatments, and it's able to give you an idea of your own, subjective condition.
Many asthma patients struggle with unpredictable flare-ups. How does AirSense help in predicting and preventing these episodes?
Right. So again, at a cellular level, we know that there are certain cytokines that are released that lead to this airway remodeling, that lead to when an asthma exacerbation happens. So if we can probe for these, if we can say, hey, it looks like something's about to happen, then we can start to warn or indicate to an asthma patient, it looks like your breathing's a little bit off. It looks like your chest might be tightening. Hey, it sounds like a little bit of wheezing is happening. So these things that may be very subtle to a patient, that may be, not even noticeable, the device is picking up. And that's really an issue with asthma monitoring. It's that a lot of these things are so subtle that we really can't tell. Right. And so that's where the device like this comes in, to be able to alert the user that something looks like it's happening.
So at the Bridging the Gaps in Respiratory Care in Ontario discussion that we had only a few weeks ago, I was asked this question. So I thought it was fitting to put it in and reverse it back to you two. How do you see wearable technology like AirSense fitting in mainstream asthma care in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I can start us off. So as a clinical researcher, we have tailored AirSense first to be used in clinical trials. And so drug sponsor companies that are leaders in this asthma space, they often have a lot of their own IP that never makes it to the market. And that's because the protocol uses the spirometry device. And so first, we are hoping to get an entry into the market by using this device in those early phase clinical trials. And then from there, once the device has been properly trained, and then we get that early user feedback, we will bring this device forward to the patients in a B2C model. And so to answer your question, Josh, the asthma monitoring space really needs to kind of help improve the current research for asthma first. So then we know that all of these promising drugs can actually help a lot of the different patient populations that suffer from asthma. But again, those drugs can never make it to the market without having a great study protocol. And so that's what we're hoping to do with this device. And Pavan, if you want to jump in on this question as well, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I did want to add a few things. So like Sahil mentioned, there's a lot of innovation that gets stopped at, discoveries at IP. You really haven't seen it commercialized properly. And in the next few years, we'll definitely see, technology evolve. We'll see better ways to integrate monitoring into clothing, into different very complicated technologies. However, one way that I predict this to kind of impact the wearables scene is that this now needs to be translated back into what's accessible for the patient, because you can develop some really complicated technology. You can, make it really advanced, but then it's going to be not affordable. It's not going to be affordable. It's not going to really be covered all that well, right? So at the end of the day, we have to see what is it that the patient can achieve realistically. And especially in Canada, what is it the buying power of a patient? Are they going to pay out of pocket? Are they going to rely on insurance? Are they going to rely on OHIP, right? So these kind of decisions are very important to guide development, right? What is it that we can realistically expect a patient to dish out? Are they going to be able to buy something super cutting edge? Like, no, maybe not. If we want to aim at if accessibility is a priority for us, then we have to guide development accordingly.
The nature of asthma is highly individualized. We often think of asthma as one condition, but it affects everyone differently. How does technology like AirSense help provide a more personalized approach to asthma care?
Yeah, I can start us off on this one. So I think at this bridging the gap in respiration event, we actually spoke a little bit about our trips to Louisiana. We both went to New Orleans recently, and it was really funny because Josh was talking about how it affected him. I was like, oh my gosh, the humidity levels here, I just can't right now. And I was talking about, I went there and I'm like, I actually really prefer the higher humidity, because for me, my asthma gets triggered in a very dry environment. And, maybe if I stayed there longer, then, the humidity might have affected me differently. But really, there is this narrow band when it comes to humidity of what's comfortable. And that band is different for everyone, right? So that really highlights that, okay, just because you have this umbrella term of asthma, you have TH2 like high asthma, you have TH2 low, you have allergic asthma, non-allergic asthma. So you have quite a distinct ways of how it's classified, and then in even more distinct ways of like how it presents for patients and how patients experience it. So this nuance is very important to address. And this is where something like AI can really be helpful and really understand how your asthma is affecting you, how your physiological symptoms are changing and fluctuating in an attack, before an attack, right? So I think the ubiquity of asthma has really desensitized a lot of us to the fact that this is a disease that we are still learning about. Just because it's everywhere, 1 in 6 Canadians or 1 in 5 Canadians have it doesn't mean that we know exactly everything about it, right? So we still need to drive research. We still need to drive innovation. And this also has to be tailored to what patients need for themselves, because you can't just have a one size fits all. And we're learning that. And that's really important to us. And that's guiding our development as well.
So let's move on to challenges and breakthroughs, because I'm sure you've had a lot of each. Developing medical devices comes with regulatory, financial, and technological challenges. What were some of the biggest obstacles you faced in bringing AirSense to life?
That's a great question. And I think one of the biggest challenges for an early stage medical device company is the funding. obviously it's costly to, go through the whole intellectual property, regulatory consulting, and even having full-time staff to bring forward this vision. But I want to take a moment to acknowledge some of the great programs and resources that are available through the provincial government here in Ontario. So this includes great programs like Intellectual Property Ontario. There's a lot of regional innovation centers that provide direct funding. So, shout out to IDEA Mississauga, Altitude. There's Brampton Venture Zone, Venture Lab. All of these organizations have significantly helped us. And besides the high cost of running a medical device startup company, especially since you're pre-revenue, another challenge is speaking to healthcare providers early on. And in Ontario, our healthcare system has been under stress for several years now. And that has been a huge barrier for innovators like us, because it's very difficult to get access to any of these providers just to, consult and see if this is a device that can potentially benefit them. And so there's no one to really blame here, because, innovation is sometimes treated like a bad thing. Obviously, primary care, fixing the primary care system is a priority right now of the Ontario government, and they're working on implementing a lot of changes, which is great. And it gives us more hope, because we're also kind of following them. So once we see light within the primary care system, it allows innovators like us to also have more hope, because we are then one step closer to having these clinicians and other healthcare providers picking up on our medical technology.
The integration of AI into respiratory health monitoring is exciting. Can you share, Pavan, how AI-driven insights are helping improve asthma management?
Sure. Something that we've mentioned before, Josh, is how asthma, again, is very individualized, and being able to track that over time and understand patterns that we may not be able to perceive ourselves, that's very valuable. That's very valuable. And unless, you live with a physician, or, you have them in your house, how are they going to be able to tell what's happening every single day, and recognize those patterns for you? You're coming in when things get bad, right? But that's not where asthma, grows and changes. It's over time constantly, right? So having software that's ready, that's equipped to be able to track these changes that are very subtle, understand the patterns over time, that's very valuable. And that's where AI really alleviates the burden for practitioners to be able to summarize a lot of this data and present even the raw data if physicians would like to see, right? What is it, before anything can be summarized. And, it really does come down to alleviating that burden. The patients that can say, okay, maybe I should just take my medication. I don't have to go to the ER. I don't have to go, to the office just yet. There are a few things I can try differently, and then we'll see when it gets to that road, right?
And from a scientific perspective, what are the biggest challenges in developing a device that can accurately track and predict lung function changes?
Right. As we spoke earlier, again, these changes in asthma, they're very subtle. They're very subtle until there is a severe asthma attack occurring. So to be able to detect these changes that are happening, it really comes down to developing something that's very sensitive, that's very representative of what's happening physiologically deeper inside the body, and amplifying these signals and making sure they're clean and making sure they're reliable and validated. And that's where a lot of these challenges we've faced have been so far. We expect to continue to face these for some time, but realistically, we'll walk away with something very helpful, I think.
So I'd like to talk now a little bit about the future of respiratory health and innovation. Question for either of you: where do you see the biggest gaps in respiratory healthcare today, and how can technology help bridge them?
Well, for me, having experience, with rural medicine and looking at the clinics that are kind of outside of the Peel region here in Ontario, spirometry is very difficult to access. I was speaking with a couple of patients before, and we realized that it takes them up to 3 or 4 months just to get access to spirometry testing. And in addition to that, many of these clinics don't even have the device. The device is nothing great, right? So imagine having very limited access to a device that does not do much. And so that's the kind of biggest gap. And then we can look at the clinical trials aspect is that, again, there's so many great IP. Sorry, I'm referring again. There's so many great new drugs and therapies that are constantly being developed, but the issue is that we can never bring them all the way up until phase 3 or phase 4 because we do not have the correct protocol to enroll enough patients or to enroll the right amount and the right kind of patients to validate that drug.
And to add a bit to that, something that we're seeing in clinical trials is decentralization of studies. And what that means is that, the days of requiring patients to come in, visit and, have their vitals monitored, blood sampled, things like that in person, requiring them to come and use inaccessible devices. Those days are slowly starting to phase out. We see this in Europe actually quite a bit, and it's actually trending towards accessibility. Okay, what is a way that a patient can be enrolled in a study, and they can still go about their day pretty normally, their week pretty normally. So things like these, they're very important to patients who want to enroll in studies. Asthma patients, I'm sure you've heard time and time again, Josh, there hasn't been quite a bit of innovation, but that street goes a bit, 2 ways, right? So why is it that there isn't that much of an innovation? What's preventing asthma patients from wanting to enroll in these trials, right? So if we can kind of make that a bit easier and lucrative for patients, like, okay, you can actually go about your day comfortably, the data still being collected, the study can go on, right? So that can go a very long way in pushing innovation forward in the respiratory scene, very much.
And technology has really, helped us in the clinical trial space, as Pavan mentioned, decentralized clinical trials, as well as pragmatic clinical trials. This is really the future of, healthcare and bringing forward new therapies, devices, and drugs here in North America.
Are there any upcoming innovations in the respiratory health space that excite you?
So I'm sure you've seen these, Josh, where you can train your lung function, right? So these are great for, endurance training and things like that. But this started off as a clinical treatment, and this was a way to wean patients off of ventilators to strengthen their lungs through using this through various protocols. And then researchers in Arizona, they actually went and, did some studies with this and said, this is actually great for everyone to use. And, this strengthens lung functionality quite a bit. And I think there's always this urge to innovate and reinvent the wheel from scratch. But I think that true innovation lies in taking what works and improving it as well. So maybe taking devices like these and creating smart training protocols towards, asthma patients, and how is it that they can train their lungs a bit better in an accessible way. So I think innovation doesn't always have to look like, the brand new whatever, right? It's about reinventing what works, taking it out of the clinical setting, taking what works in vivo, putting it back into the clinical setting. So quite a bit of that. And I think that's what innovation I'm very excited to see is.
I just want to very quickly talk about pragmatic clinical trials. And so, as Pavan said, innovation doesn't always have to be so big. It can be just a different way of doing something, right? And so, with pragmatic clinical trials, and some of the researchers from London, Ontario, are leaders in this space. And actually, this week I'm attending a conference in Oklahoma where this is one of the key topics, right? And so really these are different from your randomized controlled trials, where pragmatic clinical trials try to, treat patients with a new approach in a real-time setting. So we don't no longer need to go through this extensive, consent procedure, and all the ethical review boards and all that stuff. So it's definitely making a change. And also, I want to acknowledge the great work that is being done by organizations like Clinical Trials Ontario, which recently implemented the Universal Clinical Trials Agreement. So this means that research that is being sponsored by academic or drug companies can get universal consent and ethical approval. So we don't need to spend so many months trying to get the research study started. It significantly accelerates the process. So once again, innovation oftentimes is confused as being, some sort of crazy medical device and stuff like that. But no, it can be as simple as a policy change. It can be a new way of doing something, or a new way of, just thinking as a system.
It doesn't necessarily mean we're reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to an inspiring entrepreneur looking to make an impact in medical technology and health innovation? I guess I'll ask this one to Sahil.
This is a great question. I started off quite early in this space, and running a medical device company will require a lot of risk taking for sure. And it's going to require you to also constantly kind of, have this ongoing conversation with yourself that, is this really going to work? Right. And those are all kind of great questions to keep asking yourself as a checkpoint. But really, the basis is within the problem that you are originally trying to solve. If that problem is backed by research, and you have a lot of key opinion leaders also validating that problem, and your solution fits well into that problem, you will be okay, right? And another thing to understand is that your device, after 5 or 10 years of development, may still end up going to fail, right? So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that if you are going to start off in this space, my advice would be to have a career that is, somewhat related to business development or healthcare. So for me, that was clinical trials and working at a clinical or trial site. And for Pavan, that is all of the extensive experience that he has with design and engineering, and now transitioning into medical school. So these are the kind of great experiences to have, and then use those experiences to build great technology. Right? That would be my number one.
That's great advice. And I feel like it translates to a whole lot of other walks of life as well, including what I'm doing here, that sometimes it might just take a little bit of time to get to where you're going to. But if you believe in what you have, the product you have, you've done your research, your due diligence, then just keep doing what you're doing, and you're going to be great.
Well said, Josh.
So let's move on to closing thoughts now. Sahil, if listeners want to learn more about DIA Labs and AirSense, where can they find you and stay updated on your work?
Yeah. So a great place to find us is LinkedIn, as well as on Instagram. We are really active on those two platforms. Our social media handle is just DIA Labs Canada. We also host events, and we have an event coming up in Mars in Toronto. So Josh, we will definitely see you there.
I will be there.
Yeah. So we always try to do events, and you can, of course, stay informed and up to date through our social media platforms. You can always check our website, dialabscanada.com.
And I will, of course, leave all those links at the bottom in the descriptors as well. So for those listeners listening in, find those links and you can easily access them. Pavan, I will ask you the second last question. So any final words of encouragement for those living with asthma and chronic respiratory conditions?
Yeah, I'll say take it day by day, one step at a time, one breath at a time, and, stay positive.
Now, at the end of each of my podcasts, I ask the guest one final question. Now, we do have two guests today, so I'm going to be asking this question twice, but I think it's important for our listeners to get two different perspectives. So we'll start with Pavan. Whether you have asthma or not, every breath we take is a gift, a reminder of our resilience, our drive to keep going, and our power to define our own limits. With a single breath, you have the potential to move mountains and change the world. So with that in mind, I have again just one final question for you. If you had only one last breath, but with it the power to influence the world, what would your message be?
I'm going to need a minute to think about that.
Josh, I'm going to ask you that question. That's a wonderful question. Wow. I really
Don't put me in that position. I haven't done my homework to answer it. I guess if I had that question on back towards me, if I had only one last breath, but with it the power to influence the world, my message would be simple. It would be to listen to the person to the right of you, to listen to the person to the left of you. And I think if we all do that, if we can all do that together, then I feel there's going to be a lot less misunderstandings in the world today.
It's a great answer. I think if I had one last breath, I would remind everyone to remember how far we've come, and that'll give us the confidence to remind us how far we're going to go.
Great answer. And Sahil, have you had a chance to think of an answer?
I would say love a little more, feel a little less. The world is a beautiful place. Just make up your mind. You're going to figure it out.
Terrific. Sahil and Pavan, I've butchered your names throughout this entire interview, but at the end of it, this has been an incredible conversation. Your work is proof that innovation, technology, and commitment to improving lives can drive real change in the respiratory health space. Thank you both for sharing your journeys and for pushing the boundaries of what's possible in asthma care. For everyone listening, if you found value in today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a review. And if you want to keep up with Sahil and Pavan and the groundbreaking work at DIA Labs, we'll have all the links in the show notes. Until next time, keep pushing forward, keep breathing deep, and never let anything hold you back. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Wheeze. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share. Follow us on Instagram at Beyond the Wheeze or follow me at the Asthma Runner for more updates. Keep breathing strong and remember, your potential has no limits. Until next time.